Hi, my fans. Jack Olesker here on episode 50. Wow. Wow, that's something. I've got a gorgeous director, all dressed up fancy on the other side here, coming from her president and CEO job for a chamber. And here I am in my Hollister t-shirt. So, different career paths, as Kim likes to tell me. Anyway, very excited. This is episode 50. Thanks to everybody for hanging around that long and going through all of these episodes and following my career. And I hope it's brought back some good memories for you. We're going to continue on and on. I'm going to do something a little different here on episode 50. Kind of like a little bit of a retrospective. It's funny how things align. As it happens, I'm doing a comic fest this Sunday. If you happen to be in the Northwest Indiana area, you can go to it at the Lake County Public Library, and you can Google it at Comic Fest. And it's a small little fest. It's nothing like He-Man thing that we had out in Los Angeles or any of these enormous festivals, Comic-Con. But we're small town Midwest. Some fans will come out. I'll sign some of my fun little mini posters, bring them back some happy memories, I hope. But I'm doing a panel, and I thought it'd be interesting. It'll give me a little chance to do a little bit of a dry run on this. And if you don't come to the Comic-Con Fest, if you live in Dubuque or Sioux City or Denver, I'll understand if you don't make the trip to Northwest Indiana. So one of the questions for the panelists, I think there's 4 or 5 of us, is going to be, how has animation and children's entertainment changed in the last decades? And I got a hunch, I may be wrong, but I got a hunch that I'm really going to be the only guy that's going to be sitting there on that panel that was there at the golden age of television animation in the 80s and 90s. Most of you probably are too young to have been there, but I certainly was there at the inception. And, I'm grateful for being called an iconic force in animation and television. Continue to do so. So one of the questions is, what do you think is one of the biggest changes? And I can tell you right now, one of the biggest changes, and Kim was with me at MIPCOM, one of the festivals that we go to in Cannes, France. Nowadays, it's in London, but in those days we would go to Cannes, France, at the Palais des Arts, and we would try to sell our shows. And one of the fellas that we worked with was named Tony Dokan from Dokan International. And Dokan, at the time, they were the largest distributor of Spanish-speaking television in the world. And of course, they had contacts in Spain and throughout South America and Central America. And we presented a project to Tony that was called Woody's World. And it was a very clever concept. It took place in this little wharf town, and Woody is like the hero, and there's this nasty bulldog that's his arch nemesis. They're all dogs. And we took a live action background, and then we took CGI 3D animated characters, and we superimposed that onto the background, which I thought was kind of clever. Of course, it was done with Space Jam and Jessica Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit and a couple of other shows. But we were kind of the first ones that were doing it with CGI, with 3D, and we showed it to Tony, and a nice fellow, a real gentleman. And he paused afterwards and he said, Jack, you guys did a really good job on this. And I remember this, and I reminded him of this as years went by. So he paused for a second and he said, but Europe will never buy a show that's 3D animation or CGI computer generated. And I said, well, and in those days, everything was 2D. It was 14,000 animated cells to do a 22-minute running time show. And very costly and very expensive. And at the time, of course, 3D animation was expensive too. So I said to Tony, Tony, you may be right that they're not going to buy it now, but never say never. And he kind of smiled and I kind of smiled. And as the years went by, we all know what happened, okay? Everything, my little Care Bears and everything is now no more 2D animation. So that's one of the tectonic changes in my industry. Of course, computers changed a lot of it once you could do it very cost effectively. It was just a question of brainwashing the new generation that this is what we're doing now. And, it's like if you're 20 years old and you grew up having to go through TSA at the airport, you think this is just the way that it is. Well, it was not always the way that it was. Ask anybody that worked at Disney or Hanna-Barbera or Film Roman, and they'll tell you it was very different back then. So that was one of the major changes. Another big change that happened in television for children's animation, and I know I was an integral part of it with the New Adventures of He-Man. And I've alluded to this in some of my past episodes here. This was maybe the first show that ever did a continuing storyline. Everything else up until then was episodic television. You would have an adventure, it would start out, all sorts of stuff would happen, but at the end of the adventure, everything would be back the way that it was. But New Adventures of He-Man was a continuing storyline, and it took a lot for us to convince the broadcasters, the syndicators, to carry a continuing episode series, because it meant that they had to air them in order. And broadcasters like to have things be as easy as possible. They want to slot it wherever they want to. But I think a lot of people, one of the things that I saw in the early days after New Adventures came out and people were slamming it left and right, a number of people said the one thing I really liked is that it was a continuing storyline. And of course, over the years, thanks to BCI with their New Adventures collection on their DVDs, a lot of fans have come around and given it another chance, and some have become converts. But that was one of the first shows that ever did it. Before then, it was Jane Jetson, it was Wilma Flintstone, and in all those kind of animated shows, which is a nice segue to my next topic that I'm talking about. It was in the Jetsons, it was Wilma, it was Jane Jetson, and in Flintstones, it was Wilma, and all those characters. And in the 70s and before, and even into the early 80s, women had a secondary role. They were there to be supportive of the male leads or whatever it was. But, women, the female characters in episodes did not wear a cape and did not have superpowers and were not going out at night jumping from rooftop to rooftop, which I don't recommend. So the show that changed that really for everyone was when Jean started having characters that were females that were important characters. And he did it with a lot of shows. He did it with Inspector Gadget, where Penny was an integral part of it. Gadget, can you imagine Gadget operating without Penny? And Haim Saban certainly did it with the Pink Ranger and the Yellow Ranger. And we started to do it more and more. She-Ra, of course, was before DIC, but there were more and more of those female characters that were coming into their own. And young women found out that you don't have to be a guy to wear a cape and be a superhero. So I felt that was something that was really, really important for girls. And that was something that I think was a big change in the 80s and in the 90s. And the other thing that was a big change. And Jean Chalopin was directly responsible for this. Before Jean came along, again, Wilma Flintstone and Betty Rubble and Jane Jetson, they were supportive of their men. And they were married. There was no question about it. They were married to their guys. But before Jean came up with Heathcliff and the Cadillac Cats, there was never a true romance angle in children's television. And Heathcliff was really the first one that came up with that. And Heathcliff's girlfriend was Sophia. And I mean, they had a really romantic relationship. And in the Cadillac Cats, Riff Raff's girlfriend was Cleo. And they had a really romantic relationship. And if you go back and look at episodes of Heathcliff and the Cadillac Cats, and you look at those two gals, I mean, they are just smoking, okay? And I can tell you, if I was an animated cat, Sophia would be on my Learjet going down to the Bahamas with me, and probably Cleo as well at the same time. But this is a family show, so I'm not going to go there. But that was really the first television series that had a romance angle. And when I started writing the scripts and when I looked at what had been done, I thought, that's really cool. And it worked with Heathcliff because Heathcliff was a tabby. And he was this rapscallion character and was always out for himself. That's all he cared about, pulling off scams, except when it came to Sophia. And that was his Achilles heel, and a wonderful Achilles heel. He really loved her, and it's sweet to look back and see that happen. It was really nice, and I liked that change. I liked all of the changes, with the exception of where animation is going today. But you know what? That's the way that it is. Everything evolves. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be talking about at the Comic Fest at the Lake County Public Library on Sunday. We're going to have a lot of fun, and I'm going to be signing a lot of my different mini posters for the fans. And it's one of the things I love is getting out from behind this desk and really relating to the fans and hearing their stories. And, oh, Mr. Olesker, you made my childhood. And I always say the same thing. Writers, producers, directors, and actors are nothing without fans. And I truly mean that from the heart. And on the occasion of this 50th episode, I really, from the heart, I want to thank all of you for following along on this adventure. I hope it's been a good one for you. We're probably about 3/4 the way through it, but we're going to keep jamming and serving up some fun stuff to you in the near future. So you take care. We'll see you soon.